Genesis 22.
Lance, I'm just wanting to, ask everyone to pray that we're taking my sister-in-law off of the respirator either today or tomorrow. And the family wants to see if anybody else wants to come see her, but she has passed away. She's respirator's always keeping her right now. Please remember us in prayers.
Genesis chapter 22. And we look at some more tests of faith that Abraham had to deal with. Today we'll be looking at the Isaac test. We finished up last week Genesis chapter 21, and we stopped at verse 21. In verses 22 down through verse 34, in this set of lessons, they kind of skip over those verses, and they did it just for the sake of time and the sake of space as they were kind of going through this. And what Genesis 21 verses 22 through 34 is a covenant that happens between Abraham and Abimelech. Okay? And what we're going to do before we get into the Isaac test, because I don't want to just simply skip over it, is we're going to read it. I'm going to touch base on it just briefly, and we'll move on into chapter 22. Again, chapter 21, verses 22 down to the rest of the chapter is, again, a covenant that's put in place between Abraham and Abimelech. And what essentially it does is it gives Abraham a defined place for him to call home. Kind of borders for his estate that he has. The place that we'll see is called Beersheba. And Abraham, in the middle of this, calls on God, we'll see here in the place of Beersheba. So let's read those verses. Just because I just didn't want to just skip past them, so let's read it and kind of at least see what happens here. And it came to pass at that time that Abimelech and Phicol, the chief captain of his host, spake unto Abraham, saying, God is with thee in all that thou doest. Excuse me. Now therefore swear unto me here by God that thou wilt not deal falsely with me, nor with my son, nor with my son's sons, but according to the kindness that I have done unto thee. Thou shalt come unto me, and to the land wherein thou hast sojourned. And Abraham said, I will swear. And Abraham reproved Abimelech because of a well of water, which Abimelech's servants had violently taken away. And Abimelech said, I wot not who hath done this thing. Neither didst thou tell me, neither yet heard I of it but today. And Abraham took sheep and oxen and gave them to Abimelech, and both of them made a covenant. And Abraham set 7 ewe lambs of the flock by themselves. And Abimelech said unto Abraham, What mean these 7 ewe lambs which thou hast set by themselves? And he said, For these 7 ewe lambs shalt thou take of my hand, that they may be a witness unto me that I have digged this well. Wherefore he called that place Beersheba, because they swear, both of them. Thus they made a covenant at Beersheba, and Abimelech rose up, and Phicol the chief captain of his host, and they returned into the land of the Philistines. And Abraham planted a grove in Beersheba, and called there on the name of the Lord, the everlasting God. And Abraham sojourned in the Philistines' land many days. So we see there just an instance where Abimelech was being previously duped by Abraham and Sarah, and they kind of come back and revisit and mention that, this kind of have this covenant between each other that they'll exist in the same place or exist in the same close to each other, but they won't have any sort of problems. Or we see Abimelech had been taken away one of the wells, probably of Abraham's family that they had there. So they at least make a covenant essentially to give Abraham borders, give him a defined place to live. Not necessarily called truce because they weren't really worried with each other, but it's sort of just kind of have a pact to be friendly. see at the end of chapter 21, that planted a grove there in Beersheba and called there on the name of the Lord, the everlasting God. Okay? Again, I didn't want to just run over that. I wanted to at least read through it. Now we get to chapter 22, which is the next test of Abraham's faith here, and we see the Isaac test. Now, this is down through verse 14. Now, this is some years later, okay? After, we don't really know exactly how long, but there's been some years here of tranquility and peace in the life of Abraham, and things have been pretty smooth sailing. Ishmael and Hagar are out of the picture. Isaac and Ishmael aren't fighting with each other. Happy life for Abraham here, I guess, for a few years, because Sarah's not seeing Hagar and Ishmael around, and she's being upset and distressed by things. So things have been pretty good for old Abraham here for quite some time. And as we know very well, there's a pretty tough test looming in the near future here for Abraham. But the reason that we see this is that the only way to move to a higher level of faith, right? The only way to move to a more dependent reliance on God is to be tested in tougher situations. Okay? To kind of stretch the limits here of our faith in God. It allows us to become more faithful in Him. Pressure, the greater the pressure on a piece of carbon, the more purified the diamond becomes. And that's essentially what's happening here in the life of Abraham. He's going to be pressured more, he's going to be pressured to exercise more faith than he has ever really been previously pushed to do. Okay, this was high council here. This was a big deal. This was a pretty extensive test on Abraham's faith. Now, I think this is important for us as we're going to see this, is that if this was very early on in Abraham's life, would he have passed this test? Probably not. Right? We can't say that for sure, but probably not. God has put him through some stuff, right? And has tested him in a variety of ways and in a variety of different avenues to kind of get him to where, God knew this was coming, right? He understood that he was going to put him through this test, and he allowed him to go through other things so that when he got to this, he had already kind of tried and true and been tested a little bit and had been through some pretty heavy things that allowed him to get to this point where he could have this much more high-pressure situation in his life. And that just shows how through Abraham's successes in these tests that we've seen, as well as Abraham's failures, that he's continued to grow in God and continue to grow closer to God and to continue to be more and more faithful and dependent on God, right? As I said, this maturing process of being a Christian it's constant. It never stops, right? It's always trying to become more and more and more and more and more like God. It's the goal. So we've seen now some growth here through Abraham. I think it's probably a safe bet to say that if God would have given Abraham Isaac 25 years ago, not made him wait for him, not went through some of the stuff, and told him to go through this, Abraham probably in his life, right? God calls here Abraham this supreme test, and therefore it is going to be his greatest victory. Okay? God is not in any way trying to tempt Abraham to sin here. Okay, let's make that statement up front. As we look through this, this is not God's attempt to make Abraham sin. Never entices him to do, or never entices him or anyone to do any type of evil. Simply just testing Abraham's faith to prove himself, right? To show the genuineness of the faith that he has, and also to strengthen him. Now we know the story. God's going to command Abraham to do what to Isaac? He's going to offer him a sacrifice, right? I use Isaac as a sacrifice. A sacrifice first slain and then burned on the altar. That's the command here. Killing and then burning on the altar. And then of course we kind of continue to see kind of what happens here. So let's read through these 14 verses first. And then we'll come back in and kind of go through it verse by verse as we do. And it came to pass after these things that God did tempt Abraham and said unto him, Abraham, and he said, Behold, here I am. And he said, Take now thy son, thine only son Isaac, whom thou lovest, and get thee into the land of Moriah, and offer him there for a burnt offering upon one of the mountains which I will tell thee of. So, well, let's just keep going. And Abraham rose up early in the morning and saddled his ass, and took 2 of his young men with him, and Isaac his son, and clave the woods for the burnt offering, and rose up and went unto the place of which God had told him. Then on the 3rd day Abraham lifted up his eyes and saw the place afar off. And Abraham said to his young men, Abide ye here with the ass, and I with the lad will go yonder, and worship, and come again to you. And Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering, laid it upon Isaac his son, and he took the fire in his hand and a knife, and they went both of them together. And Isaac spake unto Abraham his father, and said, My father. And he said, Here I am, my son. And he said, Behold the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for a burnt offering? And Abraham said, My son, God will provide himself a lamb for a burnt offering. So they went both of them together. And they came to the place which God had told of him. And Abraham built an altar there, and laid the wood in order, and bound Isaac his son, and laid it on the altar upon the wood. And Abraham stretched forth his hand, and took the knife to slay his son. And the angel of the Lord called unto him out of heaven, and said, Abraham. And he said, Here am I. And he said, Lay not thine hand upon the lad, neither do thou anything unto him. For now I know that thou fearest God, seeing that thou hast not withheld thy son, thine only son, from me. And Abraham lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, behind him a ram caught in a thicket by a thorn. And Abraham went and took the ram and offered him for a burnt offering instead of his son. And Abraham called the name of this place Jehovah-Jireh, as it is said to this day, In the mount of the Lord it shall be seen. So we see the command here in verses 1 and 2 of Abraham. And this whole event here, a famous one that we know really well, and we can talk about the unbelievability of the fact that Abraham was just so willing to do this, and it was never even really a thought. He was new. From the very beginning, he knew that God was going to be taking care of all these situations. But we see from the very first verse of this, and it came to pass after these things that God did tempt Abraham, and he said to him, and he said unto Abraham, Behold, here I am. Okay, so we see even in verse 2, he tells Abraham to take his son Isaac, calls him thine only son here because of course Ishmael's gone. Isaac was the planned one as well. Was the planned one to begin with, anyways. And told him that his son, his only son, that he lovest, and told him to take him and offer him as a sacrifice. Now, what God does here is he takes Abraham and he touches Abraham at his most tender spot. He's tested Abraham in a variety of ways with Lot and with Sarah and with Ishmael. We've seen Abraham both fail and pass a lot of these tests. But God touches Abraham here in his most tender spot. Right? Abraham had waited 25 years. 25 long years of thinking it may never happen, listening to Sarah complain and go on about how and be upset and distressed and concerned as well, mad at times, sad at times, bitter at times. He's had to endure all of this, right, for 25 years. And he himself going through his own doubt and worry and concern that they would never have a son. And then Isaac shows up, and we saw a couple of chapters ago when Isaac came, and it was just a great moment of joy. So we had Abraham and Isaac, the boy he waited on for so long, loved him more deeply, probably than words he could probably even begin to express. God reaches down and touches him in that tender spot, and wanted him to surrender Isaac to God's will. That's the test here, right? Take Isaac, your beloved son, and give him to me. Surrender him over to me. Now, when God tells Abraham to do this, we have to consider a couple of things. We know now that with the Abrahamic covenant that Isaac was the one that God had told Abraham that he was going to continue to seek through. So now God tells Abraham to turn Isaac back over and essentially sacrifice him and kill him. In the back of Abraham's mind, maybe not. You know that the thought may have been there, it may not. I would have had the thought, well, how in the world are you going to fulfill your promise if you kill my son? We don't see Abraham say that. And I think Abraham has gotten to a point now in his life that probably thinking that, God's raising from the dead, or God's going to provide in some way whatsoever. We never see a moment of hesitation here from Abraham, okay? Which I think is really kind of, it's an important moment in the life of Abraham here. At other points during this journey, as we look through now several chapters of Abraham, God told him to get up and leave, and he left, but in the middle of the journey, he got worried about Sarah, so he kind of intervened in some way. He did that a couple of times. And we've seen some of the instances where Abraham's had questioned God. Even when God took Abraham out at night, back in chapter 13, I think it was, and showed him the stars and told him that you're going to have just as many members of your family that you can count the stars. And even before God took Abraham out there, because he was trying to prove a point to him, because Abraham had some questions and had some concerns about what God was doing in his life. At this moment, though, we don't see Abraham hesitate. God tells him, take your son, offer him up as a sacrifice, and we don't ever see him even blink an eye. We don't see where he argued with God. We don't see him being concerned. We don't even see him hesitating to obey. The very next day they got up and went and did exactly as God had told him to do. Abraham here is at a point in his life where he is perfected and purified in his faith to such a point that he knew God well enough and believed that he would never do and could never do anything wrong. That's where Abraham was at. Right? He knew that this was all just part of God's plan and that nothing God did would be wrong. And I think that would be a difficult moment for a lot of us as parents, that you wake up and God tells you to take little Pippa and go sacrifice her, or whatever the case may be. And Abraham, I think I would blink an eye. I know Abraham doesn't. He gets up and does exactly what he's told to do. Because he knew God's timing was perfect. He knew God's plan was perfect. Didn't drag his feet. Remember back in Ur, God told him to leave, and he kind of let him haul around for a little bit, right? We see him here not dragging his feet. He got up, didn't try to slow things down. He hastened to obey. He saddled his donkey, he chopped up his wood, he got everything around and ready as quickly as possible. He was very active here in his faith, even when he did not understand exactly what was going on. Abraham, verse 3, on the third day, Abraham rose up early in the morning and saddled his ass and took 2 of his young men with him, Isaac his son, and clay of wood for the burnt offering, and rose up and went to the place which God had told him. And on the third day, Abraham lifted up his eyes and saw the place afar off. So we see him moving through doing things exactly as God wanted to very, very quickly. Let's go back over to Genesis chapter 15 for a second. Now, as they're on this journey, a 3-day journey to get to where God has called him to, so from the time that Abraham and his 2 men that are with him and Isaac, they get up to a 3 days travel, okay? And the whole time, Abraham, he knows what's up, right? He knows what the plan is. He knows what God has told him to do. So if we look back in chapter 15 and look at verse 1 and verses 4 through 6, we're going to see a promise here from God and see how this may have helped or encouraged Abraham as he's sleeping out underneath the stars here on the way to sacrifice his son. And after these things, the word of the Lord came unto Abraham in a vision, saying, Fear not, Abraham, I am thy shield and thy exceeding great reward. Go to verse 4. And behold, the word of the Lord came unto him, saying, This shall not be thine heir, but he that shall come forth out of thine own bowels shall be thine heir. And he brought him forth abroad and said, Look now toward heaven and tell the stars, if thou be able to number them. And he said unto him, So shall thy seed be. And he believed in the Lord, and he counted it to him for righteousness. So as Abraham is putting his tent up at night after traveling, or he's sleeping maybe out underneath the stars, and he's looking up and he's seeing the stars, we can see how Abraham would have been encouraged by the promise that God had given him many years before, looking up at the stars and telling him that his seed would not even be able to be numbered like the stars would not be able to be numbered. God used that exact instance back several years before of showing him the stars and explaining to him that his children, the people that would come from him, would be innumerable, just like the stars, because he knew that Abraham, 20-some years later, would be taking a 3-day journey, in which he would be out seeing those stars, having the toughest test of his faith that he had ever been dealt with. He knew that Abraham would be able to remember back to the point to which God told him, the very same stars he looked up at several years before, and promised him that he would be faithful. God's sovereignty never ceases to amaze me. Right? It never does. Taking Abraham out there and showing him those stars, it had a purpose at the time, explaining to him what he was going to do, but it also planted that seed of that image in his mind, because that would have been a moment in Abraham's life he would have definitely remembered. God came to him in a vision. God came to him and told him, go look outside at the stars. That would have been burned into Abraham's mind. At the very same moment, he's looking up and seeing those stars at the toughest test of his life. God has already been preparing him for this moment. God's sovereignty never ceases to amaze me. So we see on the third day, on this 45-mile journey, Abraham saw the place off in the distance. As we see in verse 5 of chapter 22, he tells the young men that are with him to stay, abide here with the ass, and I and the lad will go yonder and worship and come again unto you. So see now, in verse 5, he stops the two guys that are traveling with him. Told these two men that we're going to go, and again, Abraham has been told he's going to go up there and going to sacrifice his son. And as he sees the place, he stops the people that are with him, and he says what to them in verse 5? Stay here, tend to the donkeys, into the camp, because me and my son are going to go up and worship God. What else does he say in verse 5? What? Exactly. We will be back. We will be back. Even though that Abraham now has only been told by God that he's going to have to sacrifice his son, Abraham has now enough faith in the plan of God, right? That he's thinking that either God's going to, again, raise him back up from the dead, offer up or provide in some sort of way. But we see him telling him, these men, that we will be back. Because that's the faith that Abraham has here in God. Now, we know why Abraham obeyed here. He did not believe that God would take Isaac from him, because God had made a promise to him earlier that he was going to use Isaac to be use Isaac as the seed for all the generations to come afterwards. Isaac here, as a teenager, is carrying this heavy load of wood. We see in verse 6, and Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering and laid it upon Isaac his son, and he took the fire in his hand and a knife, and they went both of them together. So Isaac takes the heavy wood. It would take quite a bit of wood here to build this or use this as to burn a sacrifice onto the altar. And he's carrying the wood, and we see that he is carrying the heavy load of wood, just as several thousand years later, Christ was going to be carrying his own cross as well. The teen's father here is carrying the fire and the knife with him, and Isaac, the teenager, did not know that he was going to be the sacrifice. He even goes as far into verse 7 and says, and Isaac spake unto Abraham his father and said, my father, and he said, here I am, my son. And he said, behold the fire. So we've got the fire and we've got the wood. Where is the lamb for a burnt offering? So even Isaac now, as they're making the trip, they're carrying the stuff up to have this offering. He looks around and he sees his dad with the fire in his hand and a knife. He's carrying the wood. He says, everything that's needed for sacrifice, except for the actual sacrifice itself. And he asks his dad, where is it at? And you see a pretty powerful moment here in verse 8. Isaac's no dummy. He's seen sacrifices before, and he knows what has to happen. So he asks his dad, where's the lamb? See a pretty powerful moment in verse 8. Because Abraham is looking at what is supposed to be the lamb, his son. Right? And he says to him in verse 8, and Abraham said, my son, God will provide himself a lamb for a burnt offering. So they went both of them together. Teachable moment here for Isaac. Abraham sees this and sees this teachable moment because Isaac is questioning, where's the lamb at? And Abraham essentially tells him, trust in God, God will provide. You see Isaac not arguing, not questioning, saying, yes, sir, and off they went. Still unbeknownst to him that he's supposed to be the lamb, but he has seen Abraham, his father now, be faithful to God, and God be faithful to him through all of his years as a teenager. He's seen that. He's seen his dad be a good godly influence for him. Abraham is instilling into Isaac the same lessons and then the same important aspects in his own life of making sure they're trusting in God for everything here. So we see in verse 8 again that both of them then went off together. When he learned that he was with Abraham, we don't see him even really questioning Abraham in any way. Think about it, the fact here, Abraham at 100 and some years old would have probably not been strong enough to physically force Isaac onto the altar. Isaac probably had to have gone willingly here because he was being faithful to what his father said, and was also seeing God as being faithful unto his father over the years. So we see this happening as we kind of continue through to read this. Verse 9, they came to the place which God had told him, and Abraham built an altar there and laid the wood in order and bound his son Isaac and laid him on the altar upon the wood. So we don't see, we get up to the top and Isaac's probably looking around and still not seeing the lamb. I'm thinking to myself, well, God, Dad said God would provide. I'm sure he will provide. And now they're starting to build the altar up, and Isaac's still looking around and not seeing the lamb anywhere. And he said, well, Dad said God will provide. He's going to provide. And they get the altar built and put the wood on top of it, and Isaac's probably still looking around and not seeing the lamb. And thinking, well, Dad said that God would provide. And then Dad walks over to Isaac and starts to put bounds on his wrist. And I guess at that moment, Isaac probably realizes that he's the sacrifice. And as we see, no struggle, no fight whatsoever, willingly goes, first of all, because he's being obedient to his father. Abraham probably walked over at that point and said, God told me to sacrifice you. We see Isaac being obedient to his father. We see Isaac being obedient to his God. We see a great picture here that this moment is greater than who Isaac is. Isaac here being willing as a sacrifice shows that Isaac realizing how important this moment is. Christ submitted voluntarily to the Father and endured what Isaac only anticipated as he was laying there on the altar. I'll read that to you again. Christ submitted voluntarily to the Father and endured what Isaac was only anticipating as he was laying there on the altar. Even the place of sacrifice here, where this is at, is significant. It was on Mount Moriah. And Mount Moriah, if you will please go with me to 2 Chronicles chapter 3. Verse 1. 2 Chronicles chapter 3, verse 1. Mount Moriah, Jerusalem in Mount Moriah is identified as an important place. And Solomon began to build the house of the Lord at Jerusalem in Mount Moriah, where the Lord appeared unto David his father, in the place that David had appeared in the threshing floor of Ornan, the Jebusite. So we see Mount Moriah here is identified. Yes, when the Lord appeared unto David his father in the place that David had appeared in the threshing floor of Ornan and the Jebusite. And I had another scripture written down somewhere for sure too. But it's also identified in the crucifixion of Christ. Okay, that's why this place of where Isaac and Abraham are at has importance. Because Jerusalem and Mount Moriah is identified with Jesus' crucifixion as well. So as Abraham here, back over in Genesis chapter 22, draws his knife and raises it up, and he is prepared, fully prepared, and completely committed. All right, I mean, this is talk about Abraham up to this point being obedient, making Isaac carry the stuff, going to the place God called him to. We talk about how faithful he is, and the whole time here, Abraham is fully expecting God to provide. And even if we wanted to put ourselves in this situation, we'd probably get to this point where even building the altar, but putting the son down and raising the knife. Right, this is the ultimate test of faith here. Abraham is fully prepared to plunge this knife in Isaac's heart. He is. He is fully prepared to plunge this knife into Isaac's heart. As he's looking down at his son, right? Looking down into the eyes, it probably looked like his eyes. Probably had his nose. Right? I'm sure Abraham was recognizing some of these features. He's fully prepared to plunge this knife down into Isaac, but God restrains him. Right? God restrains him. Verse 10, and Abraham stretched forth his knife and stretched forth his hand, and took the knife to slay his son. And the angel of the Lord called unto him out of heaven and said, Abraham. And Abraham, and he said, Here am I. Now we don't see Abraham here once the voice is called out to stop him. We don't see Abraham going, shoot, I don't have to do it. We don't see him kind of take this moment of, get close there. We never see a moment of hesitation here from Abraham. He calls out and says, Here I am, to the voice that calls unto him. He draws the knife up there, and Abraham never wavered in his confidence in the Lord's promise that Isaac would give children, and that his descendants would ultimately inherit the land of Canaan. Hebrews chapter 11. We got to move. Hebrews chapter 11. Verses 17, 18, and 19. By faith, Abraham, when he was tried, offered up Isaac, and he had received the promises, offered up his only begotten son, of whom it was said, that in Isaac shall thy seed be called, accounting that God would be able to do what? Was able to raise him up even from the dead, from whence also he received him in a figure. So Abraham never wavered. He thought even if he did kill him, God would just raise him up. God stops Abraham from plunging the knife into Isaac, calls out Abraham's name twice, and affirmed, as we see in verse 12, but he said, Lay not thine hand upon the lad, and do anything unto him. For now I know that what? Thou fearest God, seeing that thou hast not withheld thy son, thine only son, from me. Abraham here had fully demonstrated his faith in God. He respected God for who he was, who he said he was, and he valued him because of it, and valued God above everything else. And because he respected God, trusted him, and obeyed him, God is not and did not require Abraham to sacrifice his son. Verse 13, we see he lifted up his eyes, and behold, there's a lamb. God did provide the lamb, just like Abraham told Isaac that he would. The lamb there is in the thicket for him. That became the substitute for Isaac's sacrifice. Even as Christ became the substitute for us on Calvary. It's the exact same picture that we see there. Abraham calls the name of the place here in verse 14. Abraham called the name of the place Jehovah-Jireh, as this day. The mountain of the Lord shall be seen. Jehovah-Jireh, meaning the Lord will provide. The Lord will provide. Abraham believed God would provide, and Abraham did not disappoint. Or God did not disappoint. Excuse me. Abraham has passed his test concerning Isaac, and he passed with flying colors. From the moment we first Abraham jumped onto the scene until now, we have seen a true growth in the faith of Abraham. And it's a testimony of what God did in Abraham's life. And it's a testimony exactly of what he can do in our lives as well. He can build that same type of faith and trust in him enough to let go of control of everything and to obey him no matter the circumstances. Lesson from the Isaac test. Trusting God even when we don't understand all he is intending to do. Trusting God no matter what our circumstances are. And being willing to give all we have and all that we are to the Lord. That's what we can see from the test that Abraham passed here. We've got one more test to do next week, and that's called the land test, and we'll jump into that one next week. Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for the lesson we had, for this faithfulness of Abraham, and how it's an amazing story of Abraham's willingness to turn over his son to you and never even hesitate, and the faith that he had, Lord, that a lot of times for us in those situations we would not have been able to do the same thing. But he does, and he did. Allow us, Lord, to see the picture of not only Abraham's faith, but also sees the picture of what Christ did for us on Calvary. Abraham willing to give up his son as a sacrifice, just like you gave your son as a sacrifice for us. Be our propitiation, Lord, is a substitute for our sin, a substitute for the punishment of our sin, Lord. Thank you so much for that fact. You sent your son, Lord, and you came to live for life for us, Lord. Died on Calvary, but his perfect blood to cover our sins. Let us never forget the dedication that it took, and the sacrifice that it was.